Donald Trump recently signed an executive order that makes yet another big change within the federal government. Independent agencies like the Security Exchange Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, the ones that keep Wall Street and big corporations in check, they now have to answer directly to the White House. What does this even mean? Let's get into it. So on February 18th, President Donald Trump signed an executive order titled Ensuring Accountability for All Agencies. The order says that independent regulatory agencies, and there's about 19 of them, to include, to a certain extent, the Federal Reserve, they now have to start reporting to the White House, where historically they reported to Congress. This gives him the authority for their policy and budget. It's like he walked into a room full of referees and he says, hey, you know what? You work for me now. It's a pretty bold move. Now, obviously, the White House is framing this as a win for democracy. In their fact sheet, and I'm quoting here, Article 2 of the Constitution vests all executive power in the president, meaning that all executive branch officials and employees are subject to his supervision. This is Trump essentially saying, I'm the boss of the entire executive branch, and these independent agencies, well, they're not so independent anymore. We have experts calling this a misinterpretation of the Constitution. Independent agencies were set up by Congress to be independent, free from political interference. So what's the worst thing that can happen here? Well, if you have one individual controlling the Security Exchange Commission, that agency was set up to detect insider trading, to detect fraud happening. So let's pick a stock, for example, any company. Let's look at the Trump Media and Technology Group company. Hasn't done so well over the past 12 months, but some people made money. A couple of associates named Michael and Gerald, they admitted to insider trading. They made $22 million because they knew of a merger and they traded accordingly. Now, this company, who's the majority shareholder at this time? Well, to no surprise, it was Donald Trump. His name is on the company. The SEC could also hypothetically be used to target political opponents or critics. They can influence them to launch an investigation into their companies or into their investments. Nobody really wants politics involved in an agency like this. Then we have the Federal Trade Commission. Their job is to protect consumers and promote fair competition in the marketplace. They investigate false advertising, scams, and unfair business practices. So let's take a for-profit university, for example, one that's predatory, one that exploits people by false promises. The first one that comes to my mind is Trump University. Maybe you have heard of it. That was established in 2005. They didn't have any accreditation. They didn't have any license to provide instruction. A lot of people were upset with it. There were 3 lawsuits. Donald Trump settled for $25 million. This is an example of what the FTC would target, would get involved in. In this specific circumstance, it wasn't the FTC, it was states. States were launching their own investigations, their own lawsuits. Then there's the Federal Reserve, which handles the money supply. Now, the executive order carved out an exemption for monetary policy powers, but it doesn't stop there. We're also talking about the Postal Service. We're talking about campaign finance, telecommunications. So who's running this show on Trump's end? Meet Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. You might have heard of him. He had a pretty big part when it came to writing and constructing Project 2025. Well, now he's the guy. He's the individual that approves these new regulatory changes. He approves budgets when it comes to these agencies, and he's making sure they toe the White House line. This whole movement hinges on something called the Unitary executive theory. You ever heard of that? Me either. I just read about it today. Apparently it's a fringe theory that suggests the president should have absolute authority over every single aspect within the executive branch. There are no exceptions. So picture, if you will, a king having complete dominance. And I'm not the only one picturing it. It looks like Donald Trump was picturing it as well. He posted something recently on his social media platform, Truth Social, and it basically says, congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king. This idea isn't completely new. Trump's team, to include Vought, has been dropping hints about this since back in 2023 when he said, "We're trying to identify the pockets of independence and seize them." So it really shouldn't come as any major surprise. But the intention, obviously, of independent agencies was not to answer to one politician, not to answer to one president. So what's the reaction? Like many of the other executive orders, this is met with chaos. You have legal experts right now gearing up for a fight that could take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And once it finally reaches the Supreme Court, where does the Supreme Court lean? Right now, it leans towards the conservative side. Now, the general understanding of government is Congress makes the rules, the president enforces the rules, and the Supreme Court interprets the rules. And what it seems like is happening right now is the president is kind of encroaching on Congress's territory and saying, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do your part too. Robert Weissman from Public Citizen said that the order directs all independent agencies shall subordinate themselves to OMB and Trump's OMB guy, which is Russ Vought, the Project 2025 guy. His take? This isn't just about efficiency. This is about shielding big corporations. And as it stands today, the SEC and the FTC are both investigating, guess who? Elon Musk. Coincidence? Maybe. And back in 2018, Tesla paid a $20 million fine to the SEC after Elon Musk's infamous funding secure tweet. Let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just about one executive order, it's part of a pattern. Since taking office this term, Trump has been on a nonstop mission to completely reshape the federal government. Let's take a look at some of his greatest hits so far. Firing independent watchdogs, trying to end birthright citizenship, dismantling federal agencies, slashing biomedical research, and even messing with Congress's power of the purse. Trump's not just flexing his executive power, he's trying to rewrite the rules of the game, and he has very little to lose. He shouldn't be running for president in the next term. So what does he have to lose at this point? The answer really is the midterm election. He has that to lose. That's coming next November 2026. And what we have seen in the past is when one party gets a little too radical, there's an overcorrection. Could we see that? Could we see the House end up going to the Democrats because of some of the radical actions that we're witnessing today? Okay, let's talk numbers. The SEC oversees a $100 trillion security market. That's trillion with a T. In 2023 alone, they brought over 700 enforcement actions and recovered $5 billion for investors. The FTC has handled over 1,500 cases since 2020. This resulted in big wins over monopolies and scam artists. So these are some really robust and important agencies that should remain independent. So here's the bottom line. Trump's executive order is a big swing at reshaping the government. It's rooted in this unitary executive idea. It has major agencies in its crosshairs. So is this a genius move to streamline government, or is it a power grab? Or will it be overturned soon? Now, speaking of all these dramatic changes, we got some serious layoffs about to hit the Pentagon and the Department of Defense. We're talking about tens of thousands of individuals that could be impacted, to include a lot of veterans, a lot of military spouses. If you want to know more about that, I want you to check this video out next. If you need a federal resume example, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.